Good morning, welcome ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session with Ambassador Tariq Fatemi on Pakistan Vision for Regional Peace, Prosperity and Economic Development. My name is Frederick, I'm the Director of the South Asia Program. We do indeed have the privilege to welcome this morning a very special guest. Very special guest because he is first and foremost a friend of Carnegie. He did visit and spoke in this very place several times already. A very special guest because he is, as you all know, the special assistant to the Prime Minister of Pakistan. You also all know that he has had a very long and very distinguished diplomatic career which lasted more than 35 years. He has held diplomatic posting in Moscow, New York, Washington, Beijing, and so on and so forth. So no one could be better placed to speak about the topic, which is the purpose of this meeting today. I mean, as you all know, may we live in interesting time is a Chinese say, and I think that this Chinese say very much applies to South Asia today. We just ended a month and a half ago, a period of 2 years of elections. Every single country in South Asia has held elections in the past 2 years. We also had a very specific period. You all know about the drawdown from Afghanistan, the many questions that it raised everywhere in South Asia, and so on and so forth. So no one is better placed to speak about the future of the region than somebody from the region. Of course, there are different perspectives, and there are many questions. For the first time in a long time, we have two persons in both India and Pakistan, for example, who are business-oriented. What will it mean, if anything, for the region? Is it likely to conduct to more, I would say, normal relations, or are we likely to continue to see the usual traditional political impediment between the two countries? These are the kind of questions that I hope Ambassador Fatemi will answer today. And with this word, I will not stay any longer between you and him. And please, Ambassador, this is your floor.
Good morning, all of you. Assalamu alaikum. Thanks, Fred, for inviting me. This institution has been very kind to me over the years, and I've had the pleasure of being here in this very hall on a number of occasions. I also see many of my old friends with whom we have spent many an hour going over this issue at great length. Two veterans, Daisy and Howie, are here, and I want to acknowledge their presence. They are veterans of South Asia, and they continue to focus on it with their usual insightful comments in their emails, of which I am a proud recipient every now and then. Fred, thank you once again for bringing me here to this institution. As I stated, one of your very distinguished colleagues, Ashley, has been my host on a number of occasions, and please convey my good wishes to him. I presume he's up to his usual mischief.
Aren't we all?
Yes, as we all are. Anyway, I'm here at a time when, as Fred rightly stated, we are going through very interesting times. And not necessarily all of it in the manner in which the Chinese consider this phrase. They are truly interesting times, but they are also times that cause many of us deep misgivings. Because beyond Pakistan and in the area with which we have had long historic relations going back to hundreds of years, we see events unfolding that contain within them the seeds for major upheavals and turmoil. Thank you, I can't. For upheavals and turmoil that are deeply worrying. But closer home, since that is what I'm supposed to speak on, Let me begin by, first of all, bringing all of you au courant on what has been taking place in Pakistan in the last 12 months. All of you are scholars and researchers, and you know that Pakistan has gone through a major transformation. We have not only gone through the experience of peaceful political change through the electoral process, but a change that has brought about a degree of confidence in Pakistan, within Pakistan and outside, within those who are friends of Pakistan, a degree of confidence that had not been there in the past. The electoral process has also demonstrated a commitment of the people of Pakistan to the democratic process, as well as that of the political leadership in the country. We have also had changes incidentally or coincidentally in other branches of the government taking place more or less at the same time, whether it is the judiciary, whether it is the presidency, or whether it is the armed forces leadership. And they've all gone through with an unusual degree of smoothness and clarity that again has given rise to a great deal of confidence in all of us. Now, more specifically, the government of Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has been in office for just over a year. This 1 year has very clearly demonstrated to all of us the manner in which the Prime Minister wishes to pursue policies both at home and abroad. At home, the immediate focus was extremism, energy, and education. Extremism, for reasons which I will come to later, was a historic development that had gone on for many years, but the country was faced with a situation wherein the very institutions of state were being threatened, where Pakistan, as a moderate, modern, progressive state, was confronted with a challenge that could have brought about changes that would not have either served the interests of Pakistan or those of people in the region and far beyond. Energy, for the simple reason that this particular problem had been neglected over the past 10-15 years. Many of you will be surprised to know that back in 1998, I was attending a cabinet meeting as a junior official, and we were actually discussing in Pakistan the sale of excess power to India. And last year we were sitting in the cabinet meeting and we were discussing purchase of badly needed power from India. In other words, during that entire period of an authoritarian rule, no focus, there was no attention to this area, notwithstanding the increase in population, increase in urbanization, increased requirements of power all over the country. With the result that on any day there has been a shortfall of 6,000 to 8,000 megawatts. And there is simply no way that you can supply the entire country at any one time with the available power. And therefore, when Prime Minister Cameron came to Islamabad a few weeks after Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif had taken office, and the British Prime Minister asked him, what is your #1 priority? And Nawaz Sharif said, energy, energy, and energy. For the simple reason that there can be no economic growth and development. There can be no improvement in the lives of the people of Pakistan. There can be no meaningful employment of the youth if there is no energy. And therefore, as I'll tell you later on, that has been a major subject of discussion with the US as well as with other friendly countries. Education has suffered over the past many decades, and within the limited budget resources, we have tried to focus on education. There have been a few hiccups, for the simple reason that the constitutional changes that took place in Pakistan a few years ago took out education away from the federal government's domain and on to the provincial governments, and therefore the politicians and the civil service and the various ministries and departments are still not sure as to where and how the issue of education should be resolved or tackled. But what is remarkable is that you have a government in Islamabad and you have governments in the 4 provincial capitals, and notwithstanding what you may read on and off in the newspaper, there has been a great deal of cooperation. Governments have been sitting together, debating the issues, discussing them, and then coming up with solutions that have been acceptable. Whether they are on the very critical issue of confronting extremism, or whether they are on the issue of division of resources, division of the budgetary allocations, and therefore this healthy growth and the mannerism in which the political leaderships are getting together and discussing and debating the issues and then resolving them is, in my view, a very positive development. The other thing is that the media in Pakistan, which occasionally does cause us sleepless nights, is nevertheless a very positive development. We have a very, very strong, vibrant, independent media with over 100 television channels which are free to do whatever they like and say whatever they like, even though in the last month or so there have been a bit of problems with one of the major television networks. But by and large, all the television networks are totally free of government control. In the judiciary, as I stated, the second transition has taken place. We had one about 6 or 8 months ago, and another one that took place last week, and we have a new chief of the Supreme Court. And the judiciary has continued to not only uphold the law, but to present a vision of Pakistan, which is remarkable for the manner in which the judiciary has continued to claim for itself its rightful role as provided for in the Constitution. In fact, one of the very last judgments written by the outgoing Chief Justice, Justice Gilani, was remarkable for the emphasis he placed on the state of Pakistan being proactive in the protection of the less privileged classes, the minorities, the women, and the poorest sections of society. It's a landmark judgment which you may wish to see. Now, moving on to foreign policy, the Prime Minister made it very clear in his very first statements after assuming office that he envisioned, he foresaw a neighborhood wherein political relations would be peaceful, where economic relations would be cooperative, wherein the resources, human resources, the natural resources available to the countries of the region should be there to advance the interests of the people living in the countries of the region. And therefore, whether it is India, whether it is Afghanistan, whether it is Iran, whether it is China, there has been a consistent and a public effort to reach out to the leadership of these countries. Therefore, you would have seen that we have had a number of high-level meetings with the Afghan leadership. I think 4 or 5 have taken place so far. Prime Minister has been to Kabul, President Karzai has been to Islamabad, and they talk to each other very often on the telephone. We have had exchange of delegations at ministerial level, at official level, and I would say that the many doubts and misgivings that were there in the minds of people in either capital have been taken care of, and there is a far greater degree of active cooperation on the ground, whether it be in the promotion of economic ties, whether it be in looking at projects that would do good to both countries, or whether it be on understanding relating to the common problem that both countries face vis-a-vis extremism. With India, a very important neighbor, a very important country in every sense of the word, the Prime Minister made it very clear in his very first telephonic conversation with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh that he wished to pick up the threads from where it had been abandoned in October 1999 when the military coup took place in Pakistan. And he wanted to build a relationship that would do real good to the hundreds of millions of people in both countries living in abject poverty and in a state of disenfranchisement. The Congress government, the outgoing Congress government, was already confronted with an electoral process, and therefore things were not able to move at the desired pace. But even then, you would have seen that it was at our initiative that a meeting took place between the two prime ministers on the sidelines of the UNGA in September 2013. And consequent to that meeting, it was decided that these allegations and complaints of border violations or infringement of the line of control would be resolved through the mechanism of the Director General of Military Operations talking to each other, if need be, meeting each other, and not letting these incidents get out of hand and cloud relations between the two countries. Now you would have seen that the Prime Minister immediately accepted the invitation extended by Prime Minister Modi, Prime Minister designate Modi. Prime Minister did go to Delhi. I happened to be with him, and he had a very cordial meeting with the Indian Prime Minister. Notwithstanding whatever you may have seen in the papers, because many, I think, newspapermen were genuinely disappointed that the meeting had actually not produced the kind of fireworks that would have given them the headlines that sell newspapers. It didn't, because it was a very serious engagement. It was a very focused engagement in which the Prime Minister made it very clear that he had accepted the invitation to come to Delhi because he wanted the relationship to begin on the right note. He recognized that these were two leaders who had not only come through the electoral process but enjoyed strong support in their respective parliaments. They had therefore the mandate of their people to undertake serious dialogue, arrive at meaningful decisions that would take the two countries forward together hand in hand. And the response from the Indian side was equally warm. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif also made it a point of actually going to the residence of the former Prime Minister, Mr. Vajpayee, who is very unwell these days, to offer his respects to a person for whom he has tremendous respect and regard, because it was in partnership with Mr. Vajpayee that a process of dialogue had been initiated that led to what is commonly referred to as the Lahore Declaration, that contained a roadmap of how the two countries could go ahead, engage in a peaceful dialogue process, and resolve the differences that have plagued the region for the past many decades. Consequent to that, the two prime ministers in that meeting decided that the dialogue process would be picked up at the level of the foreign secretaries, and we are now waiting for an official response from the Indian side as to when and where the two foreign secretaries would be meeting to pick up a process that had remained suspended for the past many years. But whenever the meeting of the two foreign secretaries takes place, I want to assure all of you, my friends, that Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif is convinced that it is not only good for Pakistan, and it is not only good for India, it is good for the entire region of over 1.5 billion that inhabit South Asia, that India and Pakistan should learn to live in a relationship that is mutually advantageous to both, in which the interests of the peoples should dominate the process rather than the agendas of leaderships in one or the other. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif is very confident that when he is able to meet next the Indian Prime Minister, by then the two foreign secretaries would have met, by then they would have determined how the process is to be resurrected, and how the two countries should then start actually talking of the issues that have continued to divide them. With Iran, I know for many of you, Iran is a favorite subject. It is for us as well, because as far as we are concerned, it's a neighboring country. Much of our culture, much of our language, much of our tradition, much of our history goes back to Iran. And therefore, we are deeply interested in what is taking place there. Which is why we have also welcomed the dialogue process that is taking place between Washington and Tehran. We would want to see US-Iran issues resolved peacefully. Iran is an important country with which, as I stated, we share many common features, apart from the fact that there is a long border between the two of us, and therefore it was Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's wish that a special effort should be made to improve relations between Islamabad and Tehran, which is why he traveled to Iran a few months ago. And as a result of the meeting between the two leaders, there is a visible desire and actual work on the ground to enhance economic ties, to enhance trade, of course within the confines and the parameters of the UN-approved sanctions. We have no intention of doing anything that is not approved by the UN Security Council, but within that there is a room for a major improvement, and we are focused on that. The other neighbor of Pakistan is China, and you are aware of the historically close relations that have existed for the past many decades between Islamabad and Beijing. But there is a visible qualitative improvement in relations between the two countries, especially within the realm of economic cooperation. China is the only country that has given us categorical assurances that they recognize that energy is a huge problem for Pakistan, and therefore Chinese assistance is focused greatly on how this problem can be taken care of. As a result of a number of meetings that have taken place between the leadership of the two countries, they have come to an agreement on what is broadly known as the economic corridor. It's a very ambitious project that will take a lot of money and many years of very sustained, focused, hard work on the part of the institutions in both countries. Because it envisages a land link between the city of Kashgar in Xinjiang and the city of Gwadar in Balochistan. It also envisages road and rail network in Pakistan. And finally, it envisages Chinese-Pakistani collaboration on enhancing our power sector. Roughly, we are talking of an additional 10,000 megawatt of addition to the national grid. This will require, as I stated, a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort, because it's not only setting up the power plants, but it's also going to mean new transmission lines, new evacuation facilities, new port facilities, because most of these additional power plants are going to be coal-fired. And in order to bring the coal, you need to have improved facilities at the port. Now, the result of all of this is what we are happy to claim, that it is in pursuit of the vision of having a peaceful neighborhood. Pakistan wishes to have a relationship with its neighbors that is truly devoid of differences. And where the differences are there, a genuine effort must be made to resolve them peacefully. Even on a thing like the economic corridor between Pakistan and China, the Prime Minister has made it very clear that this should benefit not simply Pakistan, it should benefit Afghanistan, it should benefit India as well. Because this corridor is so gigantic that it is simply not possible to keep our neighbors out. Bringing them in will bring value to what is known as the economic corridor. Now, let me move further away and tell you that our relations with the European Union have improved, and the proof of it lies in the fact that the European Union has taken a major decision to enhance exports from Pakistan into the European Union through a mechanism that is popularly referred to as GSP Plus facility. It decreases significantly the duties placed on Pakistan's exports, particularly and especially textile products, which have already seen an improvement in our exports of textiles to the European Union by roughly $500 million in the last 8 months. We hope and we believe that the continued enjoyment of this facility, GSP Plus, should bring in an additional $1.5 billion to $2 billion in our export earnings from the European countries. Now, the United States, long a friend of Pakistan, long a relationship that has gone through many ups and downs, long a relationship in which you have had bitter afternoons and sweet evenings, and yet we have remained friends. Notwithstanding the turbulence, notwithstanding the occasional hiccup, sometimes it's been more than a hiccup, I must acknowledge, but nevertheless there is a certain permanence about this relationship. And why? Because there is a convergence of interest. Now that interest has been differently seen at different times. But whether it was the cooperation and the partnership in the Cold War in the 50s or the 60s, or cooperation to oust the Soviets from Afghanistan in the 80s, or now in the cooperation to confront the scourge of extremism and terrorism, there is a broad recognition between the two countries and their leaders that this is a partnership that needs to be strengthened. And I am happy to inform you that after the difficult years of 2011 and 2012, and especially after Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's coming into office, a certain degree of stability and normalcy has been introduced into the relationship. No surprises are taking place. And why? Because A, there is a convergence of interest. B, there is a recognition in Washington that this democratically elected government that enjoys broad support in the country, that has the well-being and welfare of its people at heart, that has reached out to its neighbors, that wishes to create a peaceful and cooperative neighborhood, is the kind of government with which America should also be enhancing its cooperation. And therefore, you would be aware that the two countries have resumed the strategic dialogue that had gone dormant. There are 5 sectors of it, and they are all active. Whether they be on finance and trade, whether they be on strategic issues, whether they be on matters related to energy, matters related to defense. We have had a flow back and forth between Islamabad and Washington. The high point was, of course, the visit of our Prime Minister to Washington in October last year. This was the first official visit by a Pakistani leader to the US capital after many, many years. And President Obama was extremely gracious and very forthright in his commitment made privately in the meeting and publicly to the media after the meeting, that he wished to see this relationship assume the kind of permanence that would be to the advantage of peace and stability in a troubled part of the globe. The President also assured us that he viewed Pakistan's requirements, whether it be on energy, whether it be on education, whether it be on extremism, very sympathetically. And as a result of their meetings, we have had a large number of delegations coming to Islamabad or coming to Washington, discussing and finalizing understandings that we believe are going to be of tremendous help to us. You would also be aware that in the last few weeks, the Pakistan government has been engaged in what we call military operations against militants and extremists in the northwestern areas of Pakistan. You are all experts and you know that these extremists and militants who had taken refuge in Pakistan for many, many years and had assumed a very dangerous proportions that was a threat not only to Pakistan but to many other countries as well, had on and off been the target of operations. But this is the first time in Pakistan's history that a policy decision was taken that the first effort would be to engage them in a dialogue process, so as to most importantly, create a national consensus within the country, because there are parties and there are political leaders that felt that the military operations would be too disruptive, too destructive, and that this issue could be resolved through political dialogue. And therefore the Prime Minister constituted a team, and the two teams went back and forth talking as to how this issue could be resolved. It was not resolved as many of us had feared. But as I stated, the initiative for a dialogue process demonstrated the Prime Minister's commitment to finding peaceful solutions to problems. B, his recognition of the fact that being a democratically elected government, an operation of this scale and this nature needed to have national support across the board. And finally, it was to ensure that the mechanism of the military operation should be focused, should be targeted, and should avoid in every possible way collateral damage. Because after all, where these guys were living, hundreds of thousands of our innocent tribesmen were living as well. I think the operations were launched on 14th or 15th of June, if I remember correctly. So far, they have been very successful. A very large number of militants have been killed. Larger numbers have been captured. Dozens and dozens of safe haven and sanctuaries have been destroyed. Their communication facilities have been eliminated. They are on the run. But the government of Pakistan has made a number of things very clear. A, this operation will continue as long as it is needed. B, this operation does not discriminate between groups or factions of the extremists. All militants, irrespective of their nationality or their political orientation, will be subject to the laws of the country. Whether they be from Pakistan, or they be from neighboring countries, or they may be from far-off countries in North Africa or in Central Asia, they would all be dealt with equally. So there is no discrimination, no distinction at all of any kind. And anything that you read or hear elsewhere is false, is baseless. We are also talking very regularly to members of the US administration, keeping them fully informed. We are also keeping the Afghan government informed. In fact, we have had a visit by the National Security Advisor of President Karzai, Mr. Spanta, 2 weeks ago, during the course of which we have established what we call a working group, in which we will continue to discuss both at the level of the military commanders and at the level of the political leaders, how best to ensure that the two countries are on the same wavelength on this issue and on all issues related to border management and confronting the extremists. We have also conveyed to Kabul that we would very much want them, as we have conveyed to the US, that we would want them to take similar measures on the other side of the frontier so that any militant or extremist who may be fleeing from the military operations in Pakistan can be dealt with on the other side. This is a very serious effort that's cost us a lot of money, and regrettably many young soldiers and officers of the Pakistani armed forces have also lost their life in this operation. But we are very confident that once this operation is concluded, militancy and extremism will have been taken care of in Pakistan. That, ladies and gentlemen, is where Pakistan is and where Pakistan-US relations are. Let me conclude by telling you that it's a country of 180 million people. It's a developing country. It's a country that has seen military interventions on more than one occasion. Institutions have been weakened as a result of these political turmoils. We have had difficult relations with our neighbors, primarily India and Afghanistan. The focus has therefore not been as sharp as it should be on the requirements of the people, whether it be economic requirements, health requirements, education requirements. But there is a different change. There is a transformation. There is a tremendous degree of commitment of all our political leaders, barring a few that fly in and fly out, to the democratic process. Everybody wants to see them resolved through what we call our National Assembly and Senate and the 4 provincial assemblies. There is also a common desire to see relations with neighbors improve, which is why the Prime Minister's outreach to Kabul, his outreach to Delhi, has been widely welcomed in Pakistan. There has been no opposition to the Prime Minister's publicly proclaimed commitment to seeing relations with Afghanistan and India assume not merely normalcy, but a cordiality and a cooperation that would do good to the people of these countries. So we are also moving in the direction of economic growth and development. And you can see this by the fact that there has been an improvement, a small improvement, but from 3%, 2.5% to 3% annual growth rate, we have had a growth rate of 4.1%, which is very meager, I know, but it is in the right direction. Foreign exchange reserves have also gone up. Again, they are very small, and you get this feeling even much more when you go to Beijing, because you talk to the guys in China Development Bank, and they tell you that they merely have $1.7 trillion at their disposal. So ours is small change compared to that, but it's in the right direction. Karachi Stock Exchange, notwithstanding all the turmoil in the city, has broken all previous records, having hit the 30,000 mark a week or 10 days ago. Remarkable. Our foreign investment into Pakistan in the last 12 months has doubled. Again, it's very small, very modest, but again the trend is in the right direction. We are seeing growing interest in a number of foreign countries, especially in the Gulf and in Europe, that want to come and invest in Pakistan. The power projects are attracting a lot of interest. Infrastructure projects are attracting investment. Roads, railways are attracting foreign investment. These all are good signs. They are modest, but they are very encouraging. Therefore, my friends, what I bring to you from Pakistan is a message that Pakistan is on the road to a better tomorrow. It will be a difficult, occasionally painful, and even occasionally turbulent. But the conviction of the leadership is there. They have the credibility, they have the popular support, and they have friends in many capitals, including Washington, that want to see Pakistan become a moderate, modern, progressive state that becomes a valuable member of the international community. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen.